Okay, good evening, everybody. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Since 5 p.m., the board has been in closed session for discussion of lawfully closed meeting minutes for purpose of approval by the board, the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, and litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal. I'll entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to come out of closed. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome to our February business meeting. Our mission is February, right? Yeah, February. Our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. We'll start out with a roll call before we bring some of those students in.
Student Ambassador President Jody Nemeth, Board Members Present Terry Fielden, Susan Price, Jackie Romberg, Mike Yench, Dave Weeks, and Susan Crivey.
Okay, and I'm very proud to present Ms. Katie Lynch, principal of Meadow Glens, with 6 of our finest students from the district who she will introduce here.
I brought 5 of our 5th graders here, and I have a little bit of a frog in my throat, so I'm going to ask them to actually introduce themselves.
I'm Namit Badgankar.
I'm Michael Sosniak.
Elsie Kaczynski. My name is Sarah Koo.
My name is Sofia Gonzalez.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and doing that. You did a great job. Just fun out. Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks again. Thanks for your patience. Of course. Any speakers? Okay, very well. That was fun. Now we go into more fun stuff with recognition. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bridges, and we'll recognize some people.
One of my favorite parts of our board meetings is the opportunity to recognize individuals in our school district for recognition that they've received in other places. Sometimes we have the opportunity to bring students in front of you. Tonight we have an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of 2 of our staff members, significant accomplishments and recognition that they've had on the state level, which not only celebrate the work that they've done as individuals, but how they represent us in what they do in their profession. So it's a great honor for me to do that tonight. I'd like to ask Michael Jelenic to please come forward. Naperville North history teacher Michael Jelenic has been named the Veterans of Foreign Wars Illinois High School Teacher of the Year. Naperville's Judd Kendall VFW Post 3873 sponsored Mr. Jelenic, and this contest highlights teachers who promote patriotism, civic responsibilities, and Americanism in the classroom. His entry will now be sent to the National VFW, where he will be considered alongside other entries for recognition as the VFW's National High School Teacher of the Year. Congratulations on your recognition, and good luck. We'll say in a husky howler that Principal Popt had sent out to his recipients. I don't know that he could have provided a better compliment than saying simply, those of you that know him know that this is well-deserved. So again, congratulations. Okay. We know that our program and what we do for our students goes beyond just the traditional classroom and involves our co-curriculars. And so I'd like to invite Jeff Blackett to come up here with me. The National Federation of High School Coaches Association has recognized Naperville Central High School girls water polo coach Jeff Blackett as the 2012 Illinois Coach of the Year. The Lady Redhawks water polo team advanced through state series last season, defeating Mother McCauley in the quarterfinals and St. Ignatius in the semifinals before finishing the season with a state runner-up trophy. This was the girls water polo program's 4th trophy in 5 years. 2012 saw the establishment of 9 school records, including records for wins, goals in a season, and goals allowed in a season. Additionally, 6 members were named to the all-sectional team, 4 were named all-state, and 3 members of last year's squad were named to the all-American team under Coach Blackett's leadership. Congratulations. Principal Wiesbrook and Athletic Director Mr. Letzenkirchen shared with me it's important to note that Jeff is recognized not only as a significant water polo coach, but he is everything Naperville Central. So congratulations to both of you on representing yourselves so well and our school district. Thank you. We're also going to share with you congratulations to 9 District 203 high school students who were selected as candidates for the United States Presidential Scholars Program from Naperville Central. There were several students as also from Naperville North. The program was established in 1964 by executive order of the President to recognize and honor some of our nation's most distinguished graduating seniors on the basis of their accomplishments in many areas: academic and artistic success, leadership, and involvement in school and in the community. Students were sent invitations to apply for this year's competition. Application materials include essays, self-assessment, secondary school reports, and transcripts. And the semifinals will be posted in early April, and scholars announced in early May. And we hope at a future board meeting to bring those students forward to recognize them.
And just for people who aren't familiar with the program, besides Mr. Bridges' description, having had one kid who went through this, just to be selected as a candidate is huge. It's a huge pool of people. It's very hard. It's a very difficult application process. So this is quite an accomplishment, but they have not reached the end of their journey yet. So we wish them the best of luck. Okay, on to public comment. We didn't receive any requests to speak, but as is our custom, I will query once more. Were there any people that want to make any public comments right now that didn't get a chance or didn't know about filling out a request? Okay, then we'll move on to communications and start off with our student ambassador report.
Hi everyone. So last month I talked about our spring dance, and I said I would be announcing the theme. So very exciting to hear that A Journey to Sunken Treasure is our turnabout theme for this year. So we have all underwater theme, and student government is getting very excited to set up for that. This year we're also moving to online ticket sales. We're also going to be having them during the school day, but we're hoping to make it a little more efficient and more effective and hopefully get some better numbers this year. A few months back I also talked about the Sodexo contract, and we talked about possibly getting students on a panel to discuss possible future plans and possible alternatives to that program. I just want to reiterate the purpose of that is our entrepreneurship course is currently unable to sell any types of food or anything of that sort during the lunch hours or any time that Sodexo is selling during the day. We respect and we completely understand this is by policy and we have really no control over that. However, we are kind of looking to maybe find an alternative that would be able to benefit that course still, because that is something that's very important to those kids, and we want to make sure that they're able to continue that course in the future and other areas like that. Also, on Valentine's Day, just a few days ago, last Thursday, we had our school's blood drive, and this year we're very proud to say that we got 219 pints of blood. So I know per person that donated, it's supposedly supposed to save 3 lives. So having 219 pints is definitely going to make an impact on our community. So we thank you to everyone that participated in that in North. We also, unfortunately, had to defer 50 candidates, or 50 donors, I apologize, 50 donors, but 15 to 20 community members actually came out. So we got a little bit from the community too, which is pretty cool. And that was sponsored by Heartland Blood Center. So recently, as you guys know, students have been taking the Illinois Essential Survey, and we've actually been getting some pretty positive feedback on that, so I'm sure you guys are wanting to hear about that. And students have actually been feeling more appreciative knowing that their voices are being heard. So it's pretty nice, just to take a quick 10-15 minutes out of their day knowing that it's going to be making a difference. It's pretty cool, so thank you for that. Just on another note, our spring musical has been announced. It's going to be Legally Blonde this year, so it'll be very exciting, very flamboyant in that sense. That's going to be directed by Mr. Jansen. And he actually, on another note from Mr. Jansen, is our very first Naperville North competitive show choir director. And this past weekend, they traveled to Iowa, and they took home, I couldn't even tell you how many, first and second places. I know 2 show choirs won, and they must have taken 3 or 4 first places. So they're doing a really phenomenal job, and that's pretty cool considering it's their very, first show and very first time competing. Alongside that, they also took home Top Senior Soloist, Best Costume Award, and various other things like that. So that's pretty cool. Girls gymnastics took first place at DVC a couple weeks ago, and I think they just, deserve a shout out because these girls are just absolutely amazing. Not only are they amazing athletes, but they are some of the most goal-oriented and team-oriented athletes I've ever met, and those girls are just so wonderful, so they definitely deserve that. Last thing I was kind of hoping George A would be here for, but North actually beat Central on Saturday night in basketball, so that was pretty cool. We are now one step ahead of them in basketball and football, so that's pretty cool. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, further under communications, you can look at our FOIA requests. Some of them are pretty interesting. So, superintendent, staff, and school reports.
Sure. Jody, you ruined it, too, because I was all set to compliment you for not taking advantage of Jarjay's absence by any of the friendly banter between North and Central that I've enjoyed this year, but it's nice to see that it's still there, even though he's not. We have several reports to share with the board and the community this evening. The first is an update on Diversity Action Plan. You'll recall that we have kept this on our agenda for periodic reports and updates on our progress on the initiatives in the Diversity Action Plan that we had presented to the Board of Education back in July. So we have 2 different reports within the Diversity Action Plan update this evening. And the first is going to be from Julie Carlson, who's going to provide you a brief update, an overview of some of the work that she's been doing regarding community outreach.
Thank you. I will try to be brief. First, I wanted to let everybody know a little bit about our school and family community partnership. Specifically today, I'm going to be talking about the work of the core team, which promotes an understanding of Joyce Epstein's framework for parental involvement. The district has partnered with Dr. Joyce Epstein and the National Network for Partnership Schools since 1996 to establish a structure to invite, encourage, and facilitate parent involvement in our schools. The framework for parent involvement involves 6 types of involvement: parenting, communicating, volunteering, learning at home, and decision-making, as well as community collaboration. And we have some of the greatest community collaborators involved in SFCP. I'm so proud to be working with this group and sharing what they've done this year. The focus for the core team this year in support of the Diversity Action Plan has been to promote activities and resources that nurture a welcoming climate. We've been trying to build trust among our stakeholders and support the action plan. So this year we've been focusing on this welcoming climate. Our SFCP kickoff event this year highlighted the best practices in our buildings that help new families to feel welcome in our schools. When I introduced the welcoming climate theme last summer to one of our core team members, Mary Wilkerson, who is also a communication arts teacher at Naperville Central, she conceived of the idea to take the details from the very comprehensive parent survival guide at the high schools and condense them into the most critical tips to help parents and high school students new to the district understand how to access resources to help them be successful in high school. So after many iterations, the result is the high school tip sheet, which was actually designed by a Naperville North graphics student, Lauren Wenig. So we've got parents involved in this, we've got teachers involved, and students involved in this. A couple of things that I'd like to point out from the cover of this. It does indicate the purpose of this document, which is created for parents by parents, and it's intended to create a welcoming environment, to increase access to key information, and to encourage parental involvement. It's brought to you by the SFCP, the School Family Community Partnership, and we also have on here a quote from Dr. Joyce Epstein, which indicates that data on student learning indicates that students do better in school when the important people in their lives at home, school, and in the community have common goals and play collaborative, complementary, and supportive roles. So all of that information is there in the tip sheet. And then we pulled out a couple of the key elements from this because on one handy sheet of paper, this handy brochure explains to new parents how to become involved. It provides solutions for students on how to solve problems and how to get basic needs for their success. This easy tool also serves as one more way to build a welcoming climate for families who are new to the district. It shows them exactly how to log on to Infinite Campus, how to sign up for parent-teacher conferences, and how to contact the right people in the buildings. The core team met recently, and they've identified multiple opportunities for disseminating the tip sheets at the high school. Some of the suggestions have been at centralized enrollment, that counselors and school staff members should have this. It should be available at parent-teacher conferences, for parent-to-parent SFCP events, at new student tours, at 8th grade orientation, and then also at kindergarten preview. I realize we're talking about the high school tip sheet right now, but we have also got a version for the middle schools, and we're at the beginning of developing something for the elementary schools. After the initial presentation of the high school tip sheet in the fall, we learned that Washington Junior High already had a similar tool, which we've already had translated into Spanish. If you look at the third panel on here, it highlights the Spanish version of the Washington Junior High tip sheet. This has already been adapted at Jefferson and Kennedy, and we have somebody at Madison working on it, and at Lincoln as well. So we're excited about those changes. Now that we have finalized the high school version of this, one of the other high school teachers at Naperville Central, Jenny Franta, has provided a Spanish translation for the brochure, and we expect the translated version to be available for parent-teacher conferences in March. Lastly, while many people may tuck a paper brochure into their purse or keep one handy by the house phone, there are also many others who carry all content on their phones these days. And the next step is for us to look at ways to make the content of these brochures and other information more mobile friendly. So we're going to be working with the district IT department, as well as some community resources to try to develop a strategy to make this a reality. And that's my report.
This grew out of what had been identified by the diversity action team last year is district one way to help build an inclusive environment needs to provide tips for welcoming new families into our community. So I appreciate the leadership that SFCP and Julie have shown in this initiative. Second part of the report tonight, I'll turn over to Learning Services and Pupil Services, is an overview or an update on the professional learning that we provided for principals and other leaders in the district this year. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dan. All principals and directors from the Administrative Center have been engaged in monthly learning to deepen the capacity for school improvement. This learning is concentrated and connected to the Diversity Action Plan in that our principals and directors are studying the concept of culturally responsive practices and how those practices influence instructional approaches, the selection of resources, and student engagement. Culturally responsive practice is a conceptual framework that can be described as a mindset and a lens through which we view our organization and the communities they serve.
In implementing culturally responsive practices, there are two very important components to consider. The first is to engage in self-reflection. So anyone learning about culturally responsive practices would use the framework to examine their culture and those represented in the organization, those cultures represented. They engage in reflective exercises to examine their own culture, their perspectives, their beliefs, and their biases. Then they engage in exercises to learn the cultures of others and challenge their assumptions about those cultures. The second important component of culturally responsive practices is using the knowledge of students and families' culture to select instructional strategies, texts for students and resources, multimodalities for learning as conduits to effective instructional approaches. In our monthly learning with the principals and the directors, the leaders have been involved in this reflective process about examining their beliefs and values. They have also made observations of words, phrases, and actions in their school communities that show beliefs and values of others in their school. Future learning with the leaders will focus on how to engage building staff in understanding culturally responsive practices and in learning tools for making community engagement and instruction responsive to all. In reading through and looking through our reflection from our work with the leaders, the reflections are showing that the learning is being received well and that our principals and our directors are excited about beginning this work with the groups that they work with and especially with our school communities.
If I could just ask about that, I mean, I think it's great, absolutely fantastic. What level of leadership, is this just the principals now, and or what, who's meeting?
It's the principals and the directors and all of the administrators here at the administrative center.
Okay, and I heard eventually you're going to empower them
Yes.
to share this in their buildings.
Right.
Great, wonderful.
Other questions? Great. Next report deals with community engagement, and tonight will mark our community engagement kickoff. It's about 10 months ago. The Board of Education appointed me to the position as the interim superintendent, and at that time I shared with you an entry and a transition plan that I plan to implement as I assume the leadership of the school district. The purpose of the plan was to engage the school district community, Naperville 203 community, in conversation about our school district in order to help develop a plan of action that would move us toward our mission and a vision of lifelong learning for all, and I called that my learning and listening plan. Over the course of the next 4 months, I conducted well over 100 formal and informal interviews with individuals and small groups of people. These groups included board members, administrators, teachers, staff members, parents, community leaders, students, and others. In August, I reported back to the board what I heard during those conversations, and a common theme was the appreciation for the quality of education our students receive. Another common theme I heard was the need to improve communication and relationships within our organization and with our community. I also heard very clearly throughout that transition the desire to continue conversation. Dialogue needed to continue, and I shared that with the board, and I recommended you in August that we begin planning for the implementation of a community engagement process that would solicit the hopes, ideas, and suggestions from our community to help us establish a clear direction for our school district. Shortly after that presentation, I had the opportunity to assume the position as superintendent. Since then, I've considered my appointment a call to action, an invitation to organize a volunteer-based community engagement program. Tonight, I'm pleased to share with you that after several weeks of planning, along with the community leadership team, we're launching Naperville School District 203's Future Focused Community Engagement Initiative. So if I could ask that we go to the attachment there in board docs here, because you're going to see a graphic here that you're going to have to become very familiar with because you're going to begin to see it quite a bit. The purpose of Future Focus 203, it actually looks a lot better than that. Yeah, so we'll see if we can work that up. The purpose of Future Focus 203 is to give us a better understanding of our community's beliefs, aspirations, desires, and priorities related to our school district. Invite and engage our community in our planning process. Obtain relevant perspectives that build upon, expand, and enhance previous planning. Collect input and data that will help us in defining priorities and improvement strategies. And build an ongoing process for strengthening trust, communication, and collaboration with our community. Earlier this morning, I had the privilege of attending a meeting with dedicated community volunteers who have accepted an invitation to serve as the Future Focus facilitating team. This team of community volunteers will help with decisions regarding process, strategy, and communications. And this team will be led by 2 community co-chairs. Their names are Kathy Ruiz and Mark Trimbacki. I'd like to take a moment and introduce them to you. They're not here with us tonight, but give you an overview of who they are. Mark Trimbacki is Senior Vice President, Risk Management of BMO Harris, with responsibility for all aspects of integrating the risk management functions, platforms, and processes relating to the acquisition of M&I Bank and BMO Financial Group. Over the last 28 years, Mark has held a variety of roles with BMO Harris and BMO Financial Group in various business lines, risk management, and acquisition integration. Mark and his family have resided in Naperville for over 25 years. Mark's 2 children, Allison and Daniel, have attended 203 schools, Riverwoods, Madison, and Naperville Central. Allison will complete her studies at the University of Illinois in May 2013. Dan will graduate from Naperville Central in May 2014. Mark is a graduate of the University of Illinois, as well as he holds an MBA in finance from the University of Chicago. He's a certified public accountant. Mark is a trustee on several nonprofit boards, Community Investment Corporation, DuPage Children's Museum, Chicago Metro History Education Center, and through June of 2011, the Naperville Education Foundation serving as its chair. Kathy Ruiz is an active volunteer in the community with such groups as the School Family Community Partnership, the Girl Scouts, and is a room parent. For the past 6 years, she's been a member of the SFCP at Highlands Elementary School, has served on several committees, and currently serves as a co-chair. During that time, she's also volunteered as a Girl Scout leader and is a room parent for her 2 school-age children who are now 9 and 11 years old. Her resume shows an extensive background in education. She worked as an elementary school teacher for 11 years. Kathy received a bachelor's degree in elementary education from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in curriculum and supervision from Northern Illinois University. Kathy and her family have lived in Naperville since 1996. Other community members who will serve on the facilitating team include Bill Anderson, Tom Carroll, Mike Crossett, Lauren Francis, Peggy Frank, Dan Iverson, Alyssa Johnson-Trippis, and Gretchen Zielinski. They'll be joined by board representatives Mike Jensch and Susan Price, and administrators Jen Hester, Julie Carlson, and myself. One of the primary roles of that facilitation team will be to plan a series of community engagement sessions where members of our community will be invited to take part in meaningful discussions about our district. Our first community engagement session is scheduled for Wednesday, March 13, 2013, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the large cafeteria at Naperville Central High School. This initial community engagement session will give participants a State of the District report. Following that initial report, structured small group work will be planned. Community members who attend will be seated in small groups. These small groups will be asked to provide input and feedback regarding issues and information that has been presented. Community engagement sessions will be scheduled for March, April, May, June, and September. And I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to please consider participating in this process. Very soon you'll begin seeing this logo that you see now on the screen. Thank you for getting that up. On our website, in your email, on Facebook, through Twitter, and throughout the community, and encouraging your participation. I'm excited about the promise and opportunity this process is going to bring us, and we look forward to our future in District 203. I think the wording on the logo itself really captures what this is about, an opportunity to educate, collaborate, and communicate with our community. This is an exciting process that we're really looking forward to. Any questions that you might have? Wednesday, March 13th, 7 to 9. Now, I will qualify that and say we're working on a morning session, too. The intent of this is to be able to reach our entire community and provide opportunity for everyone to participate. So as we met as a facilitating team, we're looking at scheduling morning sessions also with these, and that could end up being before the 13th, but our first official published date at this time is March 13th. Our communication plan, and Susan Rice, and working with Julie Carlson, has developed an extensive communication plan. We'll be communicating those future dates very, very soon. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. And we have a lot of information to report tonight. At the last Board of Education meeting, I provided a statement and an overview of changes that were coming to cut scores with ISAT, and promised that Tim Warenga would come to you then with an opportunity to really talk about looking, based on the new cut scores and information, how our district looks or would have looked if those were in place over the past several years. So, Tim, if you'd like to take over.
Thanks, Dan. Just want to share with you again an update on the ISAT and the developments that we've had. I'd like to share with you 3 changes that will come to the ISAT this year. The first one is focused on content. The second one is focused on the target that is set for schools. And the third one is set on the target that is set for students. 2 out of 3 of these changes are meant to align to the Common Core, and then one of them is just part of the NCLB legislation. Next slide. The first change is in regards to the actual content of the test. This is to align the test to the curriculum, and as you know, we're aligning our curriculum to the Common Core, and so 20% of the math and 20% of the reading questions that are actually in effect this year on the ISAT will be aligned to the Common Core standards and be attempting to assess that rigor. Next slide. The second change has to do with the NCLB legislation, which, as you know, has an equal step in regards to what the targets for schools are for the meets and exceeds. So the percentage that schools are to target for their meets and exceeds was at 85% last year due to a waiver the state was able to get to keep it from going to 92.5. But In terms of adequate yearly progress this year, we do expect that it will increase to 92.5 this year as well. Next slide. That brings us to the new cut scores this year that we have. There's going to be a raise in the cut scores, and the purpose of that is to take into account that over the history of ISAT and Prairie State testing, typically school districts have seen that students on the ISAT have scored as many as 10 to 15 percentage points higher than on the Prairie State exam for the exact same students as they went through the system. That was due to increased rigor. This is just a sample set of graphs from this past year from our 3rd grade reading and then our 11th grade reading to show what those scores actually were. While this is something that is to take into account the fact that the Prairie State had the ACT as part of it to increase the rigor, what the state is doing is trying to align those two tests in terms of the percentage to try to bring them into alignment. So next slide. So what they're going to do is they're going to take the current cut scores and they're going to increase them to show that the ISAT reading and math will be increased to a level that percentage-wise the meets and exceeds should be very similar. What the state did was they took and backwards mapped the students' scores from what they had to meet and exceed in the Prairie State and backwards mapped them to what had occurred when they were taking the ISAT to develop a new set of cut scores to see what they should be for 2013 in terms of what the scores should be. That resulted in, with our reading, a raise of 13 to 17 points. And as we can see, this is going to help align to the rigor of the Common Core. Next slide. With the math, we see that it was raised anywhere from 21 to 30 points for the different grade levels to align to that. The state has also then decided to help us in terms of our planning for the what we're doing with the ISAT to take the data that we've had from previous years' ISATs and to then apply the new cut scores to them. This would be the equivalent of if we were to put this into an educational setting. Let's say that students went through a class and the teacher said at the beginning of the class that 90% is what a student would need to get an A, and they finished the class and students were assigned the grades, and then 6 months later they would come back and say, we'd like to now make the standard be that 93% would be an A. And we'd also like to go back in time to the previous scores and assign that percentage to those scores in order to help with the planning for our students to see what it would have been like if they had been in the new system. So that's in essence what the state has done. Go ahead to the next slide. And in applying those new cut scores to our data, what you see on the left is the AYP. In blue is the exceeds. The green is the meets, the yellow is the does not meet standards, and the red is the academic warning. On the left is what our actual 2012 meets and exceeds, does not meet, and academic warning percentages were, and graphed out with the, as you can see on this one, for reading, we had 92.2% of students met or exceeded standards in 2012. By applying those new cut scores to the previous data, noticing again that the students didn't learn any less, it's just to say, let's apply that new standard to this old data. We now have that 80.2% of our students would have met or exceeded on the Illinois State test for ISAT. Next slide. This is the same slide this time for mathematics, and as we can see for 2012, our actual data was that 94.7% of our students met or exceeded on the ISAT. And as we mentioned, they raised the cut score levels a little higher for the mathematics. And so this also lowered our mathematics scores down to 80.0. So both of them, both math and reading, were what we expected. If you recall, our Prairie State scores were around anywhere from 77, 78, 79. Our ISAT scores are now at about 80% to align those two rigors in order to, as we move forward into the Common Core, to kind of show that kind of rigor with our scores so our students know what those kind of expectations are. Next slide. Are there any questions on the ISAT update?
You mentioned rigor a couple times. How is changing the scale, and I understand the 20%. I'll get to that in a second, but how is changing the scale increasing the rigor?
It's a great point. It's a term that's actually used by the state, so point well taken. It's actually just increasing, and they're saying by increasing the scale scores, they're using that as a rigor term. So you're correct. It's not actually increasing the content. That's done with the 20%. So.
Okay, and then you mentioned the 20%, and then the 92.5. So in effect, it's a triple
whammy. Yeah.
Triple whammy in that they are making the test somewhat more difficult. 20% of the questions are going to be more difficult, one would argue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
They're raising the bar as far as what meets and exceeds.
For the schools,
And, well, for the students, too.
And for the students.
For the students on the grades they get. And then for the schools, they're raising the bar on how many need to meet and exceed.
Correct.
And the only good thing is that I guess they're doing this for everybody. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting when these scores come out for the state. And as far as we know, we have not gotten any waivers for AYP. So effectively, 90-something% of the schools in the state will not make AYP next year if nothing changes.
That is correct. And the state has applied for a waiver again this year, and we're waiting to hear whether that waiver will come through and put us in for AYP in a case of what is called multiple measures, which would use several measures, including things like the 5 essentials this year, as part of that state planning for what could happen in the future.
Now, since they were kind enough to retroactively update our scores for last year, are we going to be able to argue under AYP things that there was improvement in some schools?
Yeah, we can. That's actually the advantage of them applying it to several years, and we've also done our own study. We've applied those standards to the last 4 and 5 years in order to help our schools plan, and because it is about school improvement, and for them to be able to see what the trends are for their own schools in that process.
Okay.
I want to ask the obvious question that we've asked before, and I know you've covered it. What are they hoping to accomplish by doing this? By telling us that a greater percentage of our students aren't doing well, and that what are they hoping to accomplish by this?
I think in essence it's because of once we move to the PARCC assessment in 2 years, they anticipate that rigor to be higher, and so what they're trying to do is move us to kind of the planning stages now for that, in order so that once we get there, it doesn't feel like we're moving off the cliff then. Instead, we can now plan and work with those scores and help our students recognize the individual goals they're setting for that. And
the PARCC assessments, along with Common Core, are the same assessments that will be used by students other states participating in PARCC. So we get compared to Kentucky and Missouri and
over 20 states, yes.
Over 20 states for the same tests, so that you can really look at that based not just on Illinois-wide, but PARCC group-wide as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Okay, next, the board will recall that Citizens Finance Advisory Committee had asked for an opportunity to meet again in February to review the discussion that began a couple months ago regarding the levy. That group met on February 13th with the hopes that there may be some greater clarity regarding potential funding from the state and other issues that may impact our budget. And so we had that meeting on February 13th. Given how we looked at them, I have Dave speak to it more. And then we can answer any questions that you have.
Terry, could we maybe show the attachments? Well, yeah, we'll hope it comes up better than the logo did. The Finance Committee looked at some of the assumptions that we had when we looked at the projection back in November. Our hope had been actually that most of our revenue assumptions would hold stable. And the one assumption that we had in there for the pension cost shift would actually come out more favorable towards the district. Some of that did come out. For the most part, a lot of the proposed legislation, and I shouldn't even say that, it's more talk that's out there right now at the General Assembly, is if there is a cost shift, it would be at an incremental 0.5% per year towards the district, which is what we had hoped. The bad news is the revenue has actually been, at least from what we're hearing, likely to be cut from where it is, from where we were before. For example, Governor Quinn has suggested that the education budget for 2014 would be cut about $400 million. That would have an effect for us where our general state aid would be reduced by about $500 million or $500,000. Caught myself there, Dan. $500,000. So that's a decline in our revenue. In addition to that, we're kind of up against the wall with our federal money. We're at the deadline of March 1st for the federal government to come to some sort of agreement on some cuts in the budget. If it doesn't happen, the automatic cuts will be enacted, and we would expect about a 6% reduction in our federal funding. So when you combine those revenue reductions with the expectations that we had, our projection actually ends up being almost identical to what we had back in November rather than being more favorable. Given that and the continued uncertainties going forward with the state, the Finance Committee believed that the best course of action would be to leave the levy as it stands, which would be an estimated 3% increase for our average taxpayer for the school district. And when that's combined in what the CPI actually came in last year at 1.7%, if you average the two of them out, it's in the low twos. So it's not, if you take the 2 years in combination, it's about a 2%, about 2.2% increase overall. So I think that, Dan, feel free if I'm kind of setting, and I know Jackie, you were there as well, and I don't know if I'm describing their discussion.
It was a short meeting. I think that the community group wanted to, I think you've accurately characterized it. It was a short meeting, and they were very much in support of your recommendation.
Just a couple clarifications, David. Remind me, we already voted to abate the bond payments, correct? Or we have
no,
not?
we haven't yet.
We haven't. Okay.
It's on our agenda
Very soon.
tonight. If we would do that, that would be something that's recommended.
Okay. Well, but these two relate together, right? I mean, okay, that's fine. 3%. Where is that coming from? I thought that we were capped by CPI. Obviously, I'm not understanding something correctly here.
Yeah, we are capped by CPI, and CPI was 3% in 2011.
Okay, so we're projecting the 12, 13. Okay, that's right. We're in the arrears. So that'll be the biggest raise we've had in 3 or 4 years, correct?
I'd have to pull it up my projection and look back. I know we had 1 year where it was 4.1% or something like that.
Not since I've been on the board, I don't think. So, okay, great. But last year, do you recall what was last year? Wasn't it about 2.1, 2.2?
I can look that up for you, David.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
But to Dave's point, and I don't think you mentioned it, or glossed over it, for the people watching, that part of our potential tax levy was for the bonds, for the two sets of bonds, which would have been another 1.5%. Last time you recommended that we'd be fiscally sound and responsible to abate that, which we have 4 out of the last 5 years. And that is still your recommendation going forward, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Can you just reiterate, that's the bonds for the referendum?
Yes, from the
Okay,
2000.
I just wanted you to say that out loud.
And I can tell you what in 2011 it was 1.5% increase. In 2010 it was a 2.7% increase. In 2009 it was a 1.6% increase. And in 2008 it was a 4.1% increase.
That's what I recalled. Unfortunately, I don't see that we have any choice but to raise it to maximum. There's just so many uncertainties, and I hate like the Dickens to do that, but I don't see any other option, you know.
And one last question, Dave. Just for future reference, the 1.7 that's done now, right? Has that been released?
Yes.
So we know the limit. The next time we do this is going to be 1.7.
That is correct.
Okay. Which was less than you originally projected.
Yes, I had 2.1, I believe, in the projection before. Okay. 2.0.
Plus, we're in the middle of, not the middle, the beginning of negotiating a contract. So there are just a whole lot of uncertainties right now that make it prudent to do this.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Those are our reports.
Okay. President's report. Actually, the only thing I had to add, I know Dan was there last Thursday, I believe it was, or is it? No, it was 2 weeks ago. When do we have the Hall of Fame? Naperville Central. Since Jarjay isn't here, I'll fill in for him. Jarjay, no, Jarjay wasn't there, but we were. Naperville Central initiated their Athletic Hall of Fame with, I believe it was 11 inductions, 9 athletes and 2 coaches. There were one athlete from class of like 1940 or 8 or 9. So they went way back. It was very comprehensive. One of the things they said is if they wanted to, they could have easily had twice or even 3 times that number, but they decided to keep it manageable, and it was a wonderful ceremony. They did a wonderful job. I'm sure you'd recognize some of the names, but since I don't have a list in front of me, I don't want to leave anybody out. But
besides Coach Berger, who is the other coach?
Bud like Berger. I don't have the names in front of me, so
someone's got to know that here. Okay.
But
for your interest, I can have both athletic directors get those names so we can provide them. Because the week before, I also had the opportunity to attend Naperville North's Athletic Hall of Fame. But I think the neat thing, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but with Central, you think about the history of the Central Athletic Program, and that this was their first year inducting individuals into that class. It was a pretty special event. So, and it was nice to see the old-time coaches who had returned to be a part of this process.
Any other Board of Education reports? Terry.
I had the opportunity to attend the Illinois Pension Problem hosted by Darlene Singer and Tom Cross. And Tom Cross is a House Republican leader, for those who may not know. And it was a pretty good presentation. Very thoughtful, very well put together. They had a young man from downstate did a very good job in going through about 19 slides. It wasn't that well attended. Unfortunately, it was like 15 people in the audience, 4 people from District 204, and myself. And Tim Ranger was there, too. Tim was kind enough to acknowledge me when I walked in, so that's always pleasant to have somebody greet you. The state, though, has a really serious pension problem. In case anybody hasn't noticed, it chews up about 10% of our budget every year, and that's going to continue. But that 10% really doesn't touch the inherent problem going forward. They have $96.8 billion in unfunded liability in the 5 state pension systems. But beyond that, there's $125 billion in pension debt across the state, which makes us the worst in the country. So just to gloss over some of the concerns expressed by some of the people in the audience, that the board members there are really concerned that the pension is really going to put a drain on education funding in general, because it seems more and more money is going to go to pension funds and less money to education, because the governor keeps cutting the education funding in general. And they're worried that the cost shifts back to the districts are going to put more districts underwater. We're not in that dire financial conditions. 204 was very concerned about taking on more debt because they've cut $40 million out of their budget over the last 3 years. And taking on more debt could really push them into a deeper situation. Plainfield was there as well, and they're very worried about going into financial debt if the cost shift comes backwards. Part of the other thing was that Tom Cross really emphasized that there has to be some benefit reform. Part of the problem is that the pension has a cost of living increase every year. So essentially, a person who retires, their pension doubles in 20 years, and that's part of the problem with the ability to pay for it. So they're going to wrestle with it for some time. Darlene wants everybody to stay involved. I did ask Dan to post the PowerPoint on the board SharePoint site. It's really a good PowerPoint, and we'd encourage you to go through it. But more importantly, I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to stay in touch with it and see what they're going to do.
Let me just make a comment. I see Mr. Bailey back there getting ready to jump out of his seat. The only problem isn't the COLA. Part of the problem is that the state did not fund it for year after year after year.
57% of the problem is because the state didn't fund it, and only 7% is unpaid benefit.
Right. Okay, Mark? Yep.
And that problem stems back from 1996. They covered that whole history, and the whole history of what the state did about not funding the pensions and floating bonds for other reasons and covering other debt. But nonetheless, it's a real mess, and it's going to be a serious problem. It's not going to go away, and it's going to be some hurt feelings when it ultimately comes down.
And we definitely need pension reform. Regardless of how we got here, it's not fixable without some change.
Yeah, the only thing I've noticed, especially looking at the papers, sounds like this was the same thing, is that everybody in Springfield is really good at stating the problem in lots of different ways with lots of big numbers, and then when it comes to solutions, everything just kind of goes.
There was no shortage of that at the meeting. They cite one particular representative downstate as being the roadblock. So there. One person downstate. Yeah, one person downstate. Yeah. Not an MM. MM. Yeah, that would be one. Yeah.
It's south of 80.
It's kind of
not that far
I know. Anything south of 80 is downstate. As I well know from chasing work. So. But yeah, there seems to be a reluctance to just push the envelope and get a decision made. And unfortunately, Quinn does a good job of reminding them how much the pension debt is growing and the fact that it grows in leaps and bounds every day by millions of dollars every day. And if they don't do something, that's going to continue. So I think he's doing that job of reminding people, but there has to be a solution put on the table because it's not going to get any better.
Squishy the python, yes. Okay, it's a serious subject, but lack of progress is disheartening, if anything.
No, that's not our job.
Any other comments or questions? Any other board reports? Okay, monthly reports. Our treasurer, investment, insurance, and budget reports. Any comments or questions for Mr. Zager? Then we'll move to the consent agenda.
Jim, we take turns reviewing the bills and claims each month, and Jim Dennison was not able to be here tonight, but I will.
But he did review them.
But he did have time to review them and met with Dave and his staff and found everything to be in order. So I will move on his behalf. I will move approval of warrant number 376078 through warrant number 377018, totaling $17,027,698.58 for the period of January 23rd, 2013 to February 19th, 2013, and also items 8.02 and 8.03 on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Roll call.
Romberg?
Yes.
Weeks? Aye. Yench?
Aye.
Crotty? Yes. Price?
Yes.
Fielden?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, being a business meeting, we don't have We have plenty of reports, but no discussion without action. We're going to move right into discussion with action, starting off with one of our favorite subjects, the school calendar.
Well, hopefully Bob changed our perception. I thought it went pretty well at the January 22nd Board of Education meeting when Dr. Hawkins, on behalf of a calendar committee, presented to the Board of Education for their review and consideration a draft tentative 2014-2015 school calendar. Recall that we call it a tentative calendar because part of this calendar is based off of language in the current collective bargaining agreement with the NUEA, and however that may pan out with bargaining may have any sort of impact on dates in this calendar. But for your consideration and action tonight is a draft tentative 2014-2015 school calendar. Dr. Hawkins or others could respond to any questions that you may have.
My question is not about the calendar per se, you'll be glad to know. And how would this be presented on the website? Because this is going to be tentative, so we're trying to, the 13-14 calendar is the approved one, and this is the approved tentative one, so.
We would have that description with that, with some of the background material that has been presented by Bob in previous presentations regarding the criteria that's used to establish the calendar.
Awesome.
And this has been presented to the General Home and School, and they were very happy with it, especially commenting on that we have 2 full weeks in March in this calendar, whereas in other Marches we've had broken weeks, all 4 weeks. They did have a question about conferences, but that was answered easily, and they were generally very happy with this calendar.
Regarding the calendar, it's very agrarian. It's still kind of based on that, and spring break is usually one of the last weeks in March. Every year for the last 17 years, I look at flights. It's always the most expensive week, and so many people have gone to a February break. And I know that the county suggests those dates for us. Have we ever gone back? I mean, there's no reason to have spring break in March, and then go just a few more weeks. It's a lot of times we've said it feels like school's ending, or it's kind of the final march once you get to that spring break after that. Have we ever looked or asked or requested a change in date for a midwinter break rather than, a lot of people used to call it Easter break. Now it's called spring break. It does often coincide or butt that Easter break, and I'm just kind of curious if we've ever considered any of those changes, or if something would be more beneficial. Would a midwinter break be more beneficial to our students in the future rather than one closer to summer vacation?
So the short answer to your question is no.
Okay.
There has not been discussion in the past couple of years regarding any sort of variance from the recommended timeline for spring break that comes from the ROE. Part of the consideration that goes into that is looking at the overlap and in terms of employees and students and families that are affected by multiple districts. So one of the things that has traditionally been discussed is the importance of trying to be consistent with neighboring school district and other schools. But at this point, that's not something that we've looked at.
Because I know in Michigan, a lot of them have switched to that midwinter break and away from a spring break, and I was just kind of curious.
If we switch that week will then be the most expensive for airfare.
In terms of mostly looking at collar counties, if you look at Kane, DuPage, Will, suburban Cook, and Lake County, the majority of those districts maintain the traditional end of March.
It's just so old-fashioned. I mean, it's just a thought.
Have we looked at year-round school? No, I'm only kidding.
Looked at year-round school.
Dr. Hawkins might be exiting left.
Next year. Any other discussion, commentary, realizing that we discussed this last month already? Okay. We can. That's why I'm asking.
I move approval of this item 10.01, 2014-2015 school calendar as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the 2015 tentative school calendar as presented. Any further questions or discussion? Roll call.
Karati? Yes. Fielden?
Yes.
Romberg?
Yes.
Weeks?
Aye.
Yench,
Aye.
Price,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. General and optional fees.
At our last Board of Education meeting, our Chief Financial Officer, Dave Zager, presented the Board of Education with 2 recommendations for general and optional fee changes. One was in the cost that we would charge to students for the heart monitor strap. The cost of the strap itself has increased, so the increase in the fee would be reflective of that. And then the second recommendation was an increase in the fee of the junior high school yearbook. If the board has any questions regarding those recommendations, Mr. Zager could respond to those.
I move approval of 10.02 as presented.
Second?
I have a motion to second to approve the 2013-14 general and optional fees as presented. Any further questions or discussion? Roll call.
Yench,
Aye.
Price,
Yes.
Romberg,
Yes.
Fielden,
Yes.
Weeks, Crotty,
Motion carries. Thank you. Summer school.
At our last Board of Education meeting, you heard a presentation regarding recommendation for Summer School 2013 for elementary, junior high school, and high school, as well as the extended school year. So Mike Purcell is here. I don't know if Nancy Lulo is here. I didn't see her, but Mike Purcell is here, and Bob Hawkins, and then Kate Foley if you have any specific questions regarding the recommendation for summer school.
In this, I think Mike, when he presented it, wants the $9,000 for the. I thought it was $9,000. I didn't look at it again for the transportation costs to be out, which I'm totally in support of, and all the rest look good to me. So.
And to be out, we're talking separate line item,
Separate
right?
line item is what I meant.
We're still
Yeah,
approving it.
Yeah.
We're still approving it. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm still. I'm very much in support of it.
Okay.
I move approval of the summer school 2013 proposal as presented.
I have a motion and a second to approve the Summer School 2013 as presented. Any questions, discussion? Roll call.
Weeks, Fielden,
Yes.
Romberg,
Yes.
Yench,
Aye.
Crotty, Price,
Yes.
Motion carries. Finally, we have 2 resolutions for legal purposes covering the 2 bond issuances and their respective tax levies. And as we discussed earlier, the recommendation from the administration is to abate, or in other words, not collect the approximately 1.5% it would be for the 2012 tax levy for $10 million and the 2012 tax levy for the $33 million bond issues. And that discussion was before. Were there any other further questions or discussion on that?
I'm fully for it. I just, one you said was, just so the viewers know the numbers, 10 million plus
33. There were two bond issues.
Right.
And Dave, jump in there anytime you want. But in 2008, we did one for 10 million, and then because of the rules at the time, limits and better interest rates, we did the 33 the next year, for a total of 43 million in bond issues towards the $114.7 million referendum.
And if we did not abate this, which of course we're not bound to at all, and when they approved the referendum, the assumption was we would be paying for these out of additional taxes. If we didn't abate it, then in addition to that 3%, our taxes would go up at least another 1.5%.
Right, about $3,100,000 or another 1.5%.
Right. Great.
Dave, do you have any other information about this resolution or these recommendations that you think is important to share, or if they?
I think it's an important point would be that we have done this 4 out of the last 5 years, and the amount that the taxpayers are paying because of the approval of the 2008 referendum is significantly less than what had been projected at the time of the referendum. In fact, with all the abatements that have been done and selling the $33 million at a substantially lower interest rate, it's about $17.5 million less over the course of the 20 years than what had been projected. So it's a pretty big deal.
And just to be a little boastful about the work of the administration, the year that we were not able to abate, a number of people have said 4 to 5 years, was 2009, and that was CPI was 0.1%. and I think the numbers just didn't look prudent to also abate the debt service portion.
Can we take both at once, or?
I would be amenable to that.
All right. I move approval of item 10.04, abating 2012 tax levy for $10 million general obligation bonds, and 10.05, abating 2012 tax levy for $33 million general obligation bonds.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve 10.04 and 10.05 as presented. Any further questions or discussion? Roll call.
Weeks,
With regrets, aye.
Yench,
You didn't want to abate it? Aye.
Friday,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Romberg,
Yes.
Fielden,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Any new or old business? Then I will refer to the schedule of the events. And for the first time, I see high school commencement on the schedule, so it doesn't feel like it outside, but I guess it's coming close. What? Oh. But next Thursday we have District Art Show. Then our following meeting is March 4th. And then really nothing until spring break, and then the end of year fun begins. So,
Question about the art show. The art's going to be there for a couple weeks. Is there some inaugural presentation that night, or?
Yeah, I can send you that information. I know there is some sort of opening ceremony. I don't want to call it an opening ceremony, but there is a scheduled event. So.
Yeah, but the art's going to be there for a couple of
That's
weeks.
correct.
yeah, well,
I think there's something in
Dave's
your
got a
folder.
good point. The art is going to be there for longer. This is the reception to, have Dan say a few words. And
Can I ask, we usually have our district awards night later in April, and I know that because it's frequently been on my birthday, which is later than April, which is fine, but that's how I know that. Why have we moved it so much earlier in April, which is actually election night? That's entirely possible. It doesn't need to be that old. It could happen tomorrow.
A couple of reasons. One is the district calendar, which is always complicated, and one of the factors that we didn't take into consideration was election night as we were looking at this date. Also, there are several district events in April, and in order to make sure that there was enough time to get everything done well, we wanted to spread out the time between district awards and excellence in ed, and I think we have 2 or 3 other things in the middle, and not to mention community engagement. So we stretched it out a little bit that way, and it is earlier. But I believe that the event is going to start at 7:30, hopefully after the polls close.
Right, in the calendar that you see, it does show 7 o'clock, but that 7 o'clock time is the reception part of it. The program itself will start at 7:30.
any other comments on the calendar?
I move adjournment.
Oh, that was quick. I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Nobody? Oh, there we go. Any opposed? We're adjourned.